Yeah, I was reading some Facebook posts last night about the electoral college, and I decided that there's a lot of people out there that need a good civics lesson, political science lesson, history lesson. So I'm going to try to do this driving down the road, and I think I can. But there was this post that came up was about how they thought it would be a good idea to do away with the electoral college because then everyone's vote would count. Being a pure democracy and the majority rules. And so that sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Sounds like a good idea to a lot of people. And it's rearing its ugly head again. Even though the electoral college has worked for 240 years, all of a sudden we decided that we no longer want to do that. We want to do away with it. And even lower the age of voting down to 16. And that's another matter altogether, but let's just talk about the electoral college and give you a little history lesson. You see, the folks that founded this country back in the 1700s had lived under the rule of a monarch. If you don't know what a monarchy is, that's where you have a king or a queen. You have one person who basically makes all the laws. So if the king decided that you needed to be taxed at a rate of 99%, by golly, that's what you were taxed. If the king decided that you flipped him off, you flipped him the bird, and he didn't like that, he could have your head cut off. One man over all these people. And if you think about it, it was under the rule of Great Britain, United Kingdom, what we know as England, if you will. And we were under that rule as American colonists. So whatever the king said, that's what happened. So if the king said that we're going to tax tea and we're going to tax this, that, and the other, and if you do this, you can be put to death. It's all about whatever that one person said. So we decided that we didn't want to live that way anymore, so we made a Declaration of Independence back in 1776 and said we no longer want to be under that monarchy. We don't want to be under that one-man rule. And thus the American Revolutionary War started, and we'll not go into all of that. Hopefully you understand that the Americans won. And during this time in the late 1700s, we also formed a Constitution. What the Constitution is a document that says this is how our government's going to run. Now again, the Founding Fathers, most of whom had either worked on the Declaration of Independence or had fought in the Revolutionary War, but they had lived under that monarchy. They started talking about how they wanted a democracy. They wanted something where the people rule, not one person, but the people. And that was a good idea. That was a good thought. But they got to thinking about it a little bit, and they understood history. They had taken history lessons, and they'd gone to school. And they learned about the history of democracy. And they learned about its flaws. And one of the big flaws that came out of it was that it could turn into somewhat of a monarchy from the standpoint of what's called mob rule. And what that means is that no matter what in a democracy, no matter what is voted on, if the majority votes for that to happen, votes for that to be, then that's the way it is. That's the law, no matter what it is. So in other words, we have, let's just kind of round it off, we got 300 million people in the United States, and let's say that we get 160 million of them to vote to cut off the heads of everybody who is not true, anything. Let's just say that we get 160 million people, the majority, over that 150 million. We get them to vote for it, and they vote to say, okay, everybody that's not pink with purple polka dots, they have to have their heads cut off because they're no good. Well, that's not a very good thing. That's not a very good idea. You say, well, let's talk about fairness. Is it fair? Well, it's fair from the standpoint that the majority has ruled on it, the majority voted on it, and I'm sorry for all you pink and purple polka dotted people who voted against it, but the 150 million, 160 million that voted for it, who were not pink and purple with purple polka dots, well, that majority rules. So then you have a situation then that's what we call mob rule. It's not for the good of the country. It's not for the good of all the people. So again, the Founding Father kept looking at this going, well, we want a system set up to where we have not the majority rules, not a monarchy, not an oligarchy, not anything like that. We want some form of government where it's fair for everybody. And so that's why this country was founded as the United States of America as a republic, not as a democracy, even though we say that we're a democratic society and that we live in a democratic country. There's some truth to that, but at the same time, we actually are, as a country, we're a republic. And what that means is that what the Founding Fathers understood was that there were 13 states. They'd originally been colonies under the rule of England, but the 13 now states, United States, they had differences within their state borders. So you had the people down in Georgia and South Carolina and down in the South, that their economy was based on more agriculture than anything. They were very, very agricultural based. Whereas in the North, they were beginning to become more industrialized. So there was a different type of economy. Even from state to state, there was a different kind of economy. So the Founding Fathers understood this, and they said, what we need to have is we need to have equal representation in our government for everybody. So they decided, and they came up with a great idea. We're going to become a republic, and we're going to have 3 branches of government. 3 branches of government. And for those of you who don't understand what the 3 branches of government are, let me tell you what they are. They are the executive, which is what the president, that's where he comes in. You have the legislative branch, which is where your senators and your congressmen come in. And you have the judiciary. You have the judicial branch of government, and that's where the Supreme Court comes in. Those are the 3 branches of government, not the President, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, as some people, for some reason, have decided that's what the 3 branches are. That's another story altogether, but let's just go on with what I'm talking about. So the 3 branches of government were designed to help us have equal representation as a whole. Everybody has equal representation. So you have the executive, the president, who he's something of a king. We don't want to go there and say that he's a king because he's not a monarch. But he does have quite a bit of power. He doesn't have absolute power, but he has a lot of power. But he has a job. And his job is to look at the whole country, look at the whole United States and say, what's good for the country? And let me look at introducing legislation. Let me give things to the House of Representatives and to the Senate, to the legislative branch, and give them ideas of what I think would be good for the country. And so that goes there. Then you have the judiciary. Let's kind of skip over the second one there. But the judicial system, where you have the Supreme Court of the United States, has 9 appointed judges. Now these are appointed by the President of the United States. They're confirmed by the Senate, and but there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and what they do is they interpret the law. They interpret whether or not it's even constitutional for that law to exist. So, in other words, it used to be there may be a law that's passed in Congress that the president has introduced into Congress, and it passes Congress. The president signs it into law, and it becomes law. And then someone comes along and says, "Yeah, but wait a minute. It says here in this law that you can't make a left turn on a street on a Saturday afternoon." And so the judiciary, the Supreme Court, can look at that law and say, well, that law is not constitutional. And they can make that law null and void at that point. So anyway, then you have the legislative branch, and the legislative branch, they are the ones who basically make the laws. They vote on the laws, and they represent us. And they're divided up into 2 houses, divided up into the Senate, into the House of Representatives. Now, the House of Representatives are representative of districts within each of the states. So I live in Southwest Missouri, and Billy Long is my current representative from my district. I believe it's District 7, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But Billy Long, I do know, is my representative where I live in Missouri. And so he was elected by this district, not by Missouri, not by the United States. He was elected by this district within the United States in Southwest Missouri. Okay? So he represents us. Then we have 2 senators from Missouri. Each state gets 2 senators. And by the way, let me go back to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, each state has a number of representatives based on population. So a state like Texas, which has a pretty doggone big population, there's a lot of people that live in Texas, excuse me, they have more representation in the House of Representatives, because they're just a bigger state population-wise. And it's based on population, not geographical, not the geographical size, but the population. Well, in other words, a state like Rhode Island, which is a very small state, population-wise and size-wise, geographical size-wise, they're kind of a small state. So they have less number of legislators, have less number of in the House of Representatives than Texas does, or California, or any other, than New York, or where the population is higher. They just have more representatives. But then they turn around and they say, okay, we need another representation. We want every state to be equally represented. We don't want just every district to be represented. We want each state to be represented. So they came up with the idea of the Senate. And what the Senate is, each state gets 2 senators. And those senators are elected by the whole state. So in other words, we have 2 senators. We have Senator Roy Blunt in Missouri. We have Senator Roy Blunt. We have Senator Josh Hawley. They were elected by the state of Missouri, and they represent the state of Missouri. So there's 50 states, so there are 100 senators. So you have 100 senators. You have, I don't remember the number. I remember back in my in some of my classes at one time it was 536 representatives in the House of Representatives of Congress. and so we have 100, and then we have the 536. Those representatives actually make up, all of those representatives, the House and Senate, make up what's called the Electoral College. Now, how does that work? Well, each state votes in the presidential election. So everybody in the state of Missouri gets a vote. They get to vote for president. And whoever the majority in that state votes for, it's according to state law, they get a portion or all of the electoral votes from that state. So Missouri has, I want to say it's, we have 8 in the House of Representatives. Don't again quote me on that, because I'm not sure that I have to look that up. Let's say it's 8, and then we have 2 senators. So we have 10 votes in the Electoral College. So what that means is that during the presidential election, we voted in the 2016, the majority voted for Donald Trump. So Donald Trump received 10 electoral votes. Plain and simple. And so what happened in 2016 was that if you look at strictly the number of votes, what happened was Hillary Clinton received the majority of the popular votes. So in other words, if you look at the whole United States, everybody that voted in the presidential election of 2016, the majority of them voted for Hillary Clinton. So all of a sudden now everybody's jumping up and down and going, well, Hillary Clinton should have won. Well, excuse me, if that was the case, then the Electoral College, we need to get rid of it. But what could happen there? Well, let me tell you what would happen there. What would happen is that currently, right now, if you look at a map and look at how the population of the United States is sectioned out, California, especially Southern California, but California, New York, and Texas, those 3 states could quite easily determine who is the president of the United States, just because they would have the ability to have the majority of the votes. So if everybody in Texas, let's say, I know that's impossible, it's not going to happen, but everybody in Texas, everybody in California, and everybody in New York had voted for Hillary Clinton, and everybody else in the United States, and this is not completely accurate, but bear with me, everybody else in the United States voted for Donald Trump, then Hillary Clinton, if we'd have gone just strictly by popular vote and eliminate the Electoral College, then Hillary Clinton would be president. Well, you say, okay, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is now Hillary Clinton would be president, and she wouldn't represent the United States, because we all voted for Trump here in Missouri. In my scenario, the only ones that we represented would be the people of California, New York, and Texas. And Hillary Clinton would say, the heck with Missouri, the heck with Iowa, the heck with Arkansas, the heck with Oklahoma, Nevada, West Virginia, South Carolina, the heck with all of them. Anything they want, I'm not going to worry about. So where are we back to? Oh, wait a minute. Doesn't that sound something similar to what happened before the Revolutionary War? Doesn't that kind of sound like a monarchy to you? It does to me, anyway. So our founding fathers had the forethought to understand that this could happen, and they wanted to eliminate 2 things, and I think they did a very good job of it by using what we call the Electoral College. That's not to have rule by the monarchy and not to have mob rule. Think about that. Read up on it. Study it. Understand the Electoral College and why we need to keep it. Like my page, share this, tell your friends, come back to see me. Most of all, read your Bible, pray, and go fishing.